back. You're listening to You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington, and joining me, as always, Kevin Durso. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing well. How are you?
You know, I'm doing okay.
Hanging in.
It's been a long couple of weeks. If you're a friend or family member, you know that we moved from Illinois to Western Pennsylvania. Yes, that's correct. I am in Penguins country now. Going to the grocery store, I see Penguin stuff hanging. It's weird, man. It's weird walking in and just casually seeing like Chris Letang jerseys just floating around. But regardless, we have a lot of Flyers talk to get into here.
A lot.
As we kind of get into that, like Kevin alluded to there, it's a very busy week. Follow us on the social medias at YWT Podcast. Kevin is at Kevin_Durso. And I did just want to mention off the top of the show, we will be back on Sunday. The plan here is to get back on our normal every Sunday rotation, up through including as far as the Flyers may or may not go in any sort of postseason here. And all right. As far as that goes,
so we can guarantee that we'll have weekly Sunday shows for the next 3 weeks, basically, because as long as there is a regular season in the course of the week, we will have a show. So through the 21st, you can guarantee that we will have regular shows, and
then we will, as you know,
hopefully that continues. That's all we'll say.
Hopefully we get at least another couple of shows out of it. And diving right in, frankly, the Flyers are doing their best to make sure that it's only 3 more weekly shows here. 5-game losing streak. A couple of those came on the tail end of that 10-game stretch that we talked about for a while, and particularly that 7-game stretch that we really honed in on. A couple of those were towards the tail end of that. But then you come out and you do lose your next 3. You lose to Montreal. You lose to Chicago. You lose to the Islanders. All of a sudden, at the 5-game losing streak, as of this moment, as we are recording, and we are doing a little bit of scoreboard watching here on Tuesday night.
If you see me constantly looking away, you know what I'm doing right
That
now.
is what's happening, right? As it currently sits, while the Washington Capitals are playing the Buffalo Sabres, by the way, Sabres up 2-1 towards the end of the first in that one.
As a matter of fact, you're 10 seconds away from the end of the first period, so that's a great place to start this one.
But as it sits right now, the Flyers are still holding on to that Metro spot, the 3rd spot in the Metro. The numbers are pretty in favor of Washington passing them eventually at this point, but they will still hold that 2nd wild card spot.
Right. It's been an interesting last few weeks to follow this. Where do I really begin with this? Because I know how you are. You have bugged me for weeks and weeks and weeks about, come on, you want me so desperately to say, yes, I'm convinced they're making it. And I'm not going to lie to you. When they beat the Boston Bruins the way that they did a couple Saturdays ago,
early in that 10-game stretch.
No. This was this was right before the 10 was over. This was game 8 of the 10.
Oh, you're right.
I was looking at that, and I was all like, that was, quite frankly, I looked at the way they won that game. Tyson Forrester with 1.5 minutes left wins the game for them.
Incredible.
I was pretty darn close to convinced. Like, that was, to me, one of those defining moments that you sit there and you say, this wouldn't happen to a non-playoff team. A non-playoff team takes the 2-2 game. They scored with I think 4 minutes left in the first place, and gave it right back.
Yep.
So to me, the non-playoff team folds there.
Yep.
Whether it happens in overtime or not, they still probably fold there. They go out and they win the game in regulation, and they get a goal from a rookie.
Yep.
To win it.
Man, I don't know if we're going to have a ton of time to touch on Tyson Forrester, just because it is a bit of a busy show.
If you would have told me a month and a half ago he was hitting 20, I would have told you you're crazy.
And has not an impossible shot at 25 the way he's been playing. I'm not saying it's super duper likely.
Well, he's stuck on 20 right now anyway. He didn't score in Monday's game, so because of that, with 6 games left, 25 and stuff. But
he's got to be pretty good. No,
22 would be remarkable, honestly. I mean, even 20 already is remarkable enough. Like, it is a good round number for him to hit. The vibe I get from him hitting 20 is very much like when Joel Farabee hit 20 for the first time, and it was like this big deal for him too, because it was the way it was happening and things like that.
Well, sure.
Like, if you asked
Tyson Forrester on January 1st hey, how would you feel about getting to 20 this year?
Oh, he would have been thrilled.
I think he would have been pretty darn excited.
Well, considering the fact that in the middle of that, he didn't play. He didn't play in the Stadium Series. That's how, like, he was a little bit heating up before that, and then he came back, and all of a sudden it was goal upon goal upon goal, and he just kept finding a way to score goals.
Yep.
You know, and he scored some big ones, like even getting the one he did against Chicago that was his 20th. It's like they're down 2-0. He scores early in the second period. It's like that's a big goal at that spot.
That's the comeback goal. Like,
it should have
be
been,
right. Like, that should prompt the comeback. That should get you rolling.
But either way, so regardless, and I have the standings written down in front of me, kind of in my own way of organizing it, so I can kind of keep track of like how significant, you know, these games in hand are for certain teams and things like that, because it's really all over the place, and it's never going to be completely resolved. Like even down to the day after the Flyers play the Capitals in the regular season finale, the Islanders still play the Penguins. And sure, by that point, I think the Penguins are probably out of it because there's just too much. The Penguins have to go through so many teams that are in the race. Like the Penguins have a head-to-head against, I think they have a head-to-head against Washington this Thursday. And then somewhere down the line, they also have a head-to-head against Detroit. They have a head-to-head, obviously, against the Islanders at the end of the season. Like, there's too many head-to-heads with other teams in this thing for them to survive, I think. Like, those teams are going to be equally, like, those teams are going to be equally as desperate. Like, you're going to have to go through your own little gauntlet here to be relevant in that again. And they really don't have any margin for error. The Islanders, on the other hand, have a path.
Absolutely.
And because they have a path, that last game of the season looms very large, is all I'm saying about that. So I have it organized to kind of go through it a little bit and piece it together and things like that as we go through it and things like that. But yeah, that Boston game just felt like something happening, right? Like 2 late goals. It feels like you're going to potentially win the game once. It gets tied up. You score again. You do win the game. The goal was pretty to begin with. Like, that's a great shot by Forrester, too.
Oh, yeah.
So you're also riding that, right? Like, it's also the fact that it's not like it was some, like the goal they scored. I'm not trying to jump from one end of this to the other, but the goal they scored to tie the game against the Islanders, it's a greasy rebound goal, and it had to be, right? Like, so it's not pretty, but it didn't matter that it wasn't pretty. This was highlight reel material from Tyson Forrester.
That was a snipe. That was the kind of shot. That was the kind of shot that 30 and 40 goal scorers in this league tend to score. And
it's the type of shot that was advertised for him, and it's the type of shot that continues to make it makes people believe you can be an NHL scorer to some extent.
At a high level. And obviously there's more to hockey than just shooting the puck, but if you can shoot the puck at a pretty high level,
sure,
you can be pretty successful.
So I guess to go through this 5-game losing streak kind of from start to finish. Now, ironically enough, so that was a wild weekend for me as well. So when you were in the midst of a move, I was out in Colorado for 4 days. I left in the hours that followed that Boston game. So I was at the Boston game doing what I do. Yep. And then the next day by the next afternoon when they played Florida, I was in Colorado by that point.
Right.
The weather was not exactly the most cooperative in Colorado that afternoon. It started nice, and we got some activity in. We went into the Rocky Mountains for the afternoon. It was nice.
Nice.
But by the time it got close to game time, we were already on our way back, and weather was coming in. So we ended up hunkering down for the most part. So the streams still work wherever you are. So I saw majority, pretty much the whole 60 of that game.
There you go.
They lose that game for one reason and one reason only, or 2 reasons, depending on how you want to splice it. You can either use one reason and say one word, or you can point to 2 different players.
Okay.
So the one word answer is goaltending.
Fair.
The 2 that you can point to is Anthony Stolarz was really good and Felix Sandstrom was not.
So between Anthony Stolarz, Alex Lyon, like how many of Steve Mason's backups are going to come back to haunt us?
I was just thinking this morning. What I was really thinking of too is, so let's play a little game for a second, because aside from the Islanders is the only team I can't think of kind of a connection with. But I went through and I'm going through the other 4 and I go, Well, I guess not though, because for the Islanders, Detroit beat Tampa Bay the same night that they lost in overtime to the Islanders last night, and Alex Lyon gets the win for Detroit. So there's your former Flyer connection, is that the gap closed between Detroit and the Flyers because of Alex Lyon. There's your former Flyer connection with that one. The other 4 games of the losing streak, this is the types of connections I was able to pull. They lose to one of their former goalies against Florida, Anthony Stolarz.
Yep.
Against the Rangers, the head coach is one of their former head coaches, and Tortorella's former team as well. Not that there's many connections there, but you get the point.
Right.
You know, years ago, this was the other way around. Peter Laviolette on the Flyers bench, John Tortorella on the Rangers bench. Against Montreal, you lose, and the coach on the other bench is one of Tortorella's former leaders in Tampa.
Yep.
And then when you lose to Chicago, who scored a power play goal for the Chicago Blackhawks but Tortorella's former captain in Columbus, Nick Foligno? So you're losing to all of these connections, and it's like they're derailing this thing for you, helping to.
Yeah, as much as everything kind of went the Flyers' way through the first, 30, 40 games of the season on the ice, not as much recently. And it's one of those things that this team doesn't have the talent to necessarily overcome it.
I've been thinking a lot about this lately.
Okay.
So I'll make this point first, and then I do want to go back to the Florida game and kind of work my way up.
Well, and we do have some hope on the horizon, and we'll get into that here.
So the first thought I've got with this is that, and I brought up because the Flyers are sitting in a playoff spot, 3rd in the Metro technically, as we do this show, as we start this show.
Of course, but we expect that to change shortly, if not by the end of the show.
We're 1 period in, and right now it wouldn't. So let's just leave that for what it is. But they're in 3rd place in the Metro at 83 points. The 2nd place team in the Metro is 18 points ahead.
Yep.
And on top of that, you can go through and the Rangers are at 104, Carolina's at 101, Boston's at 101, Florida's playing, by the way, also at the moment, so this could change very quickly as well. But they're at 99. They're going to break 100 in the final 7 games that they have. They need a point. They'll break it. Toronto's got 8 games left. They're at 95. They'll end up breaking 100. Tampa's going to be tough because they got 8 games left. They need 11, but they'll break 95, I would say.
And they're a really, really good team. Yeah.
So, but they'll break 95 easily. And then you've got these other 2 spots where, the teams that make it may top out at 90. Honestly, it's really crazy to watch and sit there and actually be concerned about. The Flyers are at 83 points, holding a playoff spot with 2 teams behind them at 82, then one at 79, then one at 77.
A divisional.
Well, sure, but even in general, saying even in general.
Well, but even
the final one, even
if you're talking, I'm talking if we go back to 1 through 8, at least they're a 7 seed, right? Like they're not holding down one of the divisional spots.
I hear you there.
Like the Flyers have a path to hosting a playoff series at some point. It's unlikely, but it could theoretically happen
if they played one of the wild cards. Yeah,
right.
I get you.
But so here's the thing, though, and obviously
what you're saying is that if it ended today, if somehow or other by some magic Washington took out the Rangers in the first round, they would actually host the Washington Capitals.
Right, and that's insane. Go back to 1 through 8 for the conference, but whatever.
Well, I don't know if you'd be saying that when you look at the West.
I agree, but
that's the thing. Like the West is, but
of course.
But that's what I'm saying. Like the fact that I'm looking at a playoff picture, looking at the standings, and going 83, 82, 82, 79, 77, 76, even possibly you could even argue 75 for Buffalo. That you're still watching that even like a little bit. Like 7 points with 7 games to go is pretty rough. I'm not trying to say like they're really, but like you could make the argument that because there's so many teams involved that they're going to play games against each other so much that there actually is room for shuffling.
Sure.
The Buffalo Sabres are 7 points back of the Capitals right now, and they're playing each other. What happens if they win in regulation? Now it's 6 games left, and they're 5 back.
Yep.
Like it just like the fact that these teams are even alive at this point, like. It blows my mind. It really has blown my mind how mediocre the bottom portion of this playoff picture is. And like, don't get me wrong. Like one of the things I've been thinking about a lot from the Flyer standpoint is that this is still an improvement for them.
Oh yeah.
Like we would be looking at this.
They're playing with house money.
They are playing with house money. But my point is that we would be looking at this and saying, even if they were like, let's assume that the team that was, that the team that would be third or that we thought would be third or however you want to look at it, like if the Washington Capitals with the games in hand or maybe even without at this point, if you were looking at this and the Flyers were at 82 points and they needed the win last night against the Islanders, they really could use a win.
Right.
You would think we're talking about this. You would think that we're talking about this as if the Capitals were coming into that game sitting on 87 at the time. And you're 5 back and you need to cut this to 3. There's no exceptions here. If you're going to have a shot, it needs to be cut by 2. And instead, getting 1 turns out to be like okay, because there's a way somehow or other at this stage of the season that they got 1 point in a game where it puts them at 83 points and they don't play for 3 more days and they may still be holding a playoff spot because there's still that much of a gap.
Yep.
That's insanity. So like, I don't want to take away from what they've done in the sense that like I don't want to take away, like, I know I'm calling the whole thing mediocre, but what I'm trying to get is that it's far and away above what the Flyers were supposed to be. And it's more about, this is more of a conversation about how little everybody else seems to want these spots.
Sure.
That somebody else, Washington, the Islanders, the Devils, even for that matter, because we all like, I had the Devils making the Cup final in our preseason show. Man,
what a prediction.
Because, well, and did they deal with injuries at times? Like they played without Jack Hughes for a while, and I thought Jack Hughes was going to potentially have an MVP level season. That's how good I thought he was going to be.
Their goaltending has been atrocious.
Their goaltending's been horrible.
Yeah. The Devils, you assume the Devils will bounce back in some capacity next year, even if they have to go out and get a goalie. Like,
well, the biggest I can tell you the biggest problem with the goaltending, because they've had flashes. Like, even after they acquired Jake Allen, didn't Jake Allen have a handful of good games first and kind of like make you think? And then it comes crashing back down to earth. Like, it's like, oh, wait, that wasn't sustainable. You got like 2-3 games like that. And then it's nope, never mind. Here's what it is. Like, it's what was happening when they started Nico Dawes, like what, 6-7 games in a row or something like that, where it was like, yeah, the guy keeps winning for a few. And then all of a sudden you realize, oh yeah, this is why the guy was in the minors at the start of the year. Like, it's not going to keep happening this way.
Right. Well, and turning our attention back to the Flyers here a little bit. So
yeah, because actually I wanted to, it ties right in because I did want to talk about goaltending, because part of what, like, you brought up the first 40, and ironically, I know exactly where you are with this, because it's exactly where kind of things change. Because for me, you know, you've leaned on Sam Ersson so much in the last half of the season, like in this last half of the season, and you've had to. And why have you had to? Because nobody has really stepped up and grabbed the backup spot that makes you feel comfortable having any form of a rotation. If Felix Sandstrom wins a couple of games that it looks like he could win, if Felix Sandstrom gives up 5 to the Boston Bruins on the road instead of that 6th one that proves to be the backbreaker, you might win that game.
I agree.
Or at least get a point out of it and you feel better about yourself. If he makes the 2 saves that look like he obviously should make against Florida, guess what happens? You probably go to overtime and get another point. Like, this is how big the points are. There are certain games that they have where you're like, that should have been a point. Like, what was the other one? Oh, how about Cal Peterson's last game that we saw against Pittsburgh? Where again, if you could get 1 save, they scored 6, you lose 7-6. You get 1 more save, you might get a point out of that game.
I agree.
And that point becomes massive when we're looking at there's 6 left and you're up by 1 on the final playoff spot.
Well, and we're sitting here being a little bit on the doom and gloom side, talking about all these ways that they could miss and all these ways that they're trying their best to choke it away and all these. If you'll allow me, let me put on the orange colored shades for just a moment. Okay. Because it is not all doom and gloom in Flyerland, right? There are positive things going for this team. First,
does it have to do with a goalie?
Hey, listen, we'll get there. We're building.
So we're not starting there.
We're laying down some foundation here. We got some things going.
Then because I just genuinely thought that's exactly where you were going to go as soon as you were going to talk about.
No. We are culminating in the goalie. Don't you worry.
Oh no. So if you have other positives, I would love to hear them, because there's been a couple of definitely the last few games have been some negatives. So
we are culminating in the goalie here. We're gonna start with a big issue that has been plaguing this team during a decent chunk of this losing streak that was temporarily addressed on Monday, and that would be the ice time of one Sean Couturier. He was slated to return to essentially full duty on Monday night as the first line center, full power play time, etc. Gets hurt in the first period, misses the rest of the game. As of now, do we have an update on him?
No, the
Okay.
only thing I heard earlier, or that I saw what was out there is that, so I believe that Elliot Friedman said on 32 Thoughts this morning that he had a doctor appointment today, and that's all that
Okay.
we really got. Today was
Well,
a scheduled off day for the team. So
hopefully they're
probably
not getting
probably
surgery
you're
planned.
well, probably, I know we're not doing this on our usual Sunday. We're doing a Tuesday night show instead. So instead
Yep.
of the Monday news drop, probably the Wednesday
The
news
Wednesday
drop.
news up. Well, just make sure to follow Kevin at Kevin_Durso on Twitter. He'll have it over
Let's
there.
put it this way. My read on this, it's hard to get a read on the situation because they never formally, like, usually if you know something's up, they would just formally pronounce him as out and immediately get you to there's further evaluation coming. They didn't do that, but they also, like, there was, it
It's
seemed
also
like,
that time of year.
well, no, here's kind of the biggest takeaways of it. And I think I caught part of this exchange at the very tail end of it, but so Couturier goes off the ice, and I didn't see him get up hurt,
Right.
because I was following the play the other way, and
A
not to
lot of
mention,
people, yeah.
well, and not to mention the fact that they had just scored moments earlier, so you're also trying to jot down like what happened on the previous goal, and all of a sudden
There
there's
was
another
a
one in.
lot happening.
Right.
Yeah.
So I just find that he goes off the ice, but I believe I saw either the trainer come back or Darrell Williams leaned over to John Tortorella on the bench and said something, and Torts had a bit of a reaction that was kind of like, that kind of indicated, well, great, now I guess this is where we are.
Right.
And there's also reason to believe that the very quick, no, I don't have an update, like, usually if it's, I think, like, remember how Tortorella words things in post game sometimes?
Oh, we'll get to that.
No, I know, but like in terms of when it comes to stuff like this, if a guy leaves, I think there's probably more hope if you get an answer like, I've got to talk to the trainers, because that kind of indicates well, they're going to know more about it than I do. It was just one of these things where it was like, he wasn't available to us for the rest of the game, but like there's a but coming to the end of it. This was just a flat out no update, and they might have been holding on to that. So it would not shock me if we found out as soon as Wednesday that this is something that keeps him out for the remaining 6.
But here's the other thing, is that it's also kind of that time of year. And we have seen Sean Couturier.
I knew you were going to bring
horrendous things this time of year.
I knew you were going to bring this up, and I thought of it myself too. So
even if he can't play on this little weekend Buffalo Columbus swing,
this would be best case scenario.
I wouldn't be surprised if he joins the team in Montreal.
We'll see. It didn't look great, is all I'm going to say.
I don't disagree with you. I think he's probably horrifically hurt. I hope it's not severe.
Well, and to be honest,
but that doesn't mean he's not going to play.
No, but and to be honest, I understand that I understood the reduced ice time a little bit and things like that. Like, don't get me wrong, it was self-inflicted in terms of, you played the guy for 20 minutes a night in November and December. What'd you think was going to happen to him by March?
Especially when he hadn't played in 2 years.
Exactly. Right. So
there's only so much gas in that tank.
Right. And so on one hand, knowing that if his season ended Wednesday and ended in Monday night's game, I guess is more accurate, then so be it. Like,
I hope that's not the case, but I
don't want the one thing I don't want with that situation is you don't want it to be something where all of a sudden now his entire offseason becomes rehab again.
Yep.
That I agree with. But if it's one of these things that, like, I wouldn't be disappointed if the answer, like, truthfully, I wouldn't be disappointed if the answer honestly was he's not seeing the ice for the final 6. If playoffs, we'll talk later.
Sure.
Like, and because then that takes a little bit off of it, where it's like if you leave that on the table, that if they made the playoffs, he may have been able to give it a go. It means it's not something that's overly significant, that it feels like, okay, just like everybody else, whenever it would be over, you take a month off and you come back and you start working out again, right? Like most of these guys do, or whatever the case may be. So
okay, so
I hope it's not significant, though.
Right. We have our first layer, right? We have the coach being willing to play Sean Couturier a little bit more, starting to, at least willing to kind of start to get that engine revved up heading into the playoffs final stretch here.
Sure.
Next positive thing, we had some returns from injury over the weekend.
Sure.
Nick Seeler and Jamie Drysdale have made their returns to the team. Seeler on Saturday against Chicago. Drysdale Monday against the Islanders. Both guys looking like they haven't played in a couple of weeks. Obviously, some things that weren't necessarily perfect, but I don't think that anybody would argue that your defensive core is better with those two guys, typically speaking, than without those two guys, especially at this point.
Right.
So that's my second point here.
And Sealer looked better in game 2 than game 1, like clearly. I mean, the first game Sealer played was a wash anyway. Nobody looked good in that game. They got blown out by the Chicago Blackhawks. That's all you need to know. Nobody looked really good in that one.
Correct.
He looked way better in game 2, and in the
as you would expect
against the Islanders when Drysdale came back too. Like Drysdale had moments both ways. Like
of course
he helps. He gets an assist on that game tying goal, so he helps you there. But he got
and he's that kind of defenseman anyway.
I know, but he got skated around like a pylon on Bo Horvat's goal and has a role in the game winner for the Islanders. I don't
disagree with you.
The whole thing was bad. The whole final portion of that was bad. But
a guy coming back
he was coming
from
back.
An injury and didn't look terrible, all things considered. Again, he is one of those players that will sometimes cost you a little bit. But so you get them back. They're going to presumably, with a couple of days off, get a little bit more in the flow of things. By Friday night in Buffalo, I expect
two more practices too.
Well, right. I expect both of those guys to be pretty close to fully back, right? Like, I understand Jamie Drysdale only had one game where Sealer's had two, but you had a game and two practices, like you mentioned. So,
and at some point you've got to form consistency with everybody too. Like not only did Drysdale just play his first game back, but they put him on a pairing with Sealer, no less. So it's like, here's the two guys just back in the lineup, playing a very meaningful game together.
Whose timings may be a little bit weird, who might be a little right.
So. And then you got that for go like that. You got that portion too.
And then the third and possibly the most important thing that is going for the Philadelphia Flyers, and that is in favor of them making the playoffs this year, is the remaining strength of schedule. Because you look at Detroit, they got some good teams left. You look at Washington, they have some good teams left. The Flyers play the Rangers and that game against the Capitals on the Flyers' last day of the season. And that's it. You play 4 non-playoff teams. And obviously, we just watched them lose to Montreal and Chicago. So I'm certainly not saying that is, 8 free points by any stretch. But out of the remaining 6 games, I fully expect 8 to 10 points there. And you probably need 8 to really feel comfortable with a playoff spot.
I'm trying to,
and that might not even be enough, frankly. But I'm trying to be optimistic while still staying fairly realistic.
So here's where I'll try to level with you on the realistic approach.
Okay.
8 points, a 4-2 record and 8 points in the final 6 would be very good.
I agree, because
I think that if you do that, there's going to be some element of pressure on everybody else because let's think about something for a second. It's also really hard to do this right now when, with the exception of the Detroit Red Wings, everybody else plays twice before you play again. So I really need to see this picture clear up before I really make that proclamation.
That's valid.
But in the event that it's still relatively similar, and like one of the things I immediately pointed out is that, like I said, so the Islanders play 2 games before the Flyers take the ice again, which happens to be the 2 in hand, kind of. Like it evens out for a day. That'll change, obviously, but still. If the Islanders lose in any fashion in one of the 2 games, even in overtime, they can't tie the Flyers before they play again, which means you're in that spot. You're still going to hold that last playoff spot because Detroit doesn't play until Friday. So it comes back into your hands a little bit. If you go into the final 6 and it's pretty well balanced that everybody is either the same number of games played or 1 in hand, which is probably, I think it's about what it's about right.
Yeah.
Then I think 4 wins out of the 6 and 8 points is enough to put some heat on the other teams that there's not as big of a margin for error.
I agree. Yep. And you definitely do that by like you said, you've beaten up on these teams that you should beat, right? You should beat Buffalo at this point. You should beat Columbus. You should beat Montreal.
And and it's easier said than done, obviously, after watching the Montreal and Chicago games the first time around. And also in the meantime, as like we're keeping an eye on the Buffalo Washington game as we speak. And if Buffalo wins that one, then it kind of throws that into the picture also, because it's like, well, how, it's not that you should, like, it's not that it's wrong for saying you should beat teams like that, because that's how you get in, truthfully.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's not near as much of a gimme as it used to be. Like,
of course not.
Like I think the point I'm trying to make with that is that the Chicago game should have been 2 points. It just should have been, because you're better than that team, and
correct, because that's an AHL team with Connor Bedard,
right? And because it wasn't, you can't take anything for granted against anybody else, because that's the worst team that was left that you were going to face. The next one that's closest is when you play Columbus on Saturday.
Right.
And then other than that, everybody else is kind of like, it's a weird dynamic of Montreal has already proven they can beat you, and they're not much further up than some of those other teams.
Yeah.
Buffalo's sitting at 75. You got Jersey, who's at 76. You just lost to the Islanders. Washington's technically in a spot. And then, oh, by the way, yeah, what's the other one? The Rangers.
The Rangers. Right.
And listen, maybe that Ranger game comes at a great time. Like, maybe you play the next 3 games, and look, you should hopefully win 2 out of 3 just to keep the line moving. Maybe the Ranger game comes at a great time, because you're going to have something to get up for.
That would be great. Yeah. Well, and the other thing about this schedule is that you do have one back-to-back left. And now, what is the main concern with back-to-backs, Kevin?
Who you're starting in goal.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So I didn't mention something here when I was talking about reasons to be excited, right? I mentioned 6, relatively soft games left. I mentioned a motivated coach. I mentioned, we have some
motivated coach.
Oh, we sure will. We have something else to discuss here.
Mm-hmm.
And it may be the biggest story of the week, physically and metaphorically.
Well, I'll pull it up on the tab, and it's not like, honestly, I think the wording of this is even bigger than what it was going to be.
Insane.
24 hours ago.
Yep. So if we had recorded this show,
one word was not involved in this 24 hours ago.
If we had recorded this show in our normal Sunday time slot, this tab would have said Ivan Fedotov joins the Flyers. And if you're watching on our YouTube channel, there's a tab up. You can check it out. This tab would have said...
We might as well get into it. It says he debuted.
So it says it would have said Ivan Fedotov, comes to North America,
joins the Flyers,
the Flyers, whatever the terminology we would have used, right? Because what was it? Thursday was
when the rumblings came out, and then all of a sudden
Thursday we get word that he's coming.
Thursday we get word that here's what it was. Thursday we find out the contract in Russia was terminated, and now there's rumors that, well, because he has an active contract with the Flyers, there
shouldn't be any reason he can't come over.
Then the goal is he's going to try to come here. And the biggest question, so let's back up. Let's rewind for a second before we get too much further with that. There was already the story out there about how Alexei Kolosov was going to join the team as well, or will join the organization and come to North America. And there really was no hold up there. Danny Briere had actually already confirmed that one. Confirmed he was playing, that the plan was he's going to come over, he's going to start in Lehigh, and the only question is kind of, when is this going to happen? Because there's immigration issues. So it's being worked on. It'll happen at some point. Okay. You're the biggest thing with him, though, with Kolosov, is everybody was getting all hopped up about the fact that somebody else was able to come into the organization.
Sure.
One, you didn't know exactly when he was coming because of the immigration issues and all that. And 2, he's a 22-year-old kid who has never played in North America before. And now you think that you're supposed to just plop him into a playoff race in the NHL, like as if he's going to be your savior for this playoff run. It doesn't
Danny Briere said, "Hold my vodka."
Danny Briere had I assume had knowledge anyway that something else was going to be in the works at that point. And when this happens, all of a sudden it's like, oh, wow, he's coming, or he's planning, or the plan is he's going to be coming. And then you went from this could happen Thursday, as it was talked about, the contract in Russia's terminated, it could happen, to Friday morning, there's a press conference and he's here.
Right. Oh, by the way, there's a press conference scheduled for 11.
Right. He's already here. There. Right. And he's here. So this is what makes the debut timeline so fascinating.
Yeah.
He shows up. He's played. Now he just finished a season in Russia. Did pretty well, all things considered. A little bit not completely on his game in the first half of the season in Russia because he hadn't played really the year prior. Picks it up in the second half. The numbers look good. He was good in the playoffs. They lost in whatever playoff series 4-1. 4 games to 1. But he had really good numbers in it.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, and he's been the best goalie in the KHL before. Like,
sure. Oh, yeah. Well, and also, you don't have to go back too far to remember when he was also the starting netminder for the Olympic athletes from Russia in one of the last Olympics, too. Like,
yep.
He was giving you, like, that's him being right at the forefront of everything, Russian hockey related. Right?
A lot of people will tell you in, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, that he's the best goalie in the world who's not playing in the NHL.
Well, and the interesting part of this is that as you're, in watching this progression and all of a sudden Ivan Fedotov's name comes up.
Yeah.
This guy was out of sight, out of mind for the whole season. As soon as that ruling went down with the IIHF and it's, the KHL's going, don't care about it.
Which was crazy because if you remember, and I know you do, but for listeners that may not remember, the IIHF ruled that his contract with the Philadelphia Flyers was valid.
Correct.
His contract with Moscow was not valid.
And that the KHL said, who cares?
That they needed to relinquish him and let him come to Philadelphia. And Russia said, LOL, no.
Right. And the KHL said, who cares? We're playing by our own rules.
Who's going to make me?
But anyway, so because of that, not only is he out of sight, out of mind for this season in particular, he's out of sight, out of mind, possibly forever, because it's not.
He's in the Arctic Circle.
Well, it's not even just that part of it. It's not like he's 24 and not coming over. He's 27 and not coming over. Yep. It's like at some point in time, when do you just relinquish the fact that it's probably never going to happen? And if it's never, like, not even say that it's never going to happen. It's, what are you going to do? Wait until he's 30?
And then poof.
Yeah,
he snaps his fingers and we have a press conference.
And to be honest, to bring back the other portion of the whole goalie story, if you will, that's why there was so much focus on Kolosov, because it's, hey, wait a minute, this guy's 20, 21, 22. He's looking like one of the best young goalies in the KHL as well. Awesome. Okay, hey, maybe he's the guy who comes over at some point and makes this situation a little bit better, right?
Yep.
So it all worked. Not say it all worked out. It's just like it's one of those things where it's like, so the focus was on him because he was younger, and then on top of it, I was seeing more reports on what's the other kid's name? The Zavragin.
Oh yeah.
I was seeing more on him than I was seeing on Ivan Fedotov. Like,
right.
It was still lingering there, but like every time I saw a stat line for Fedotov, it was kind of one of those things where I'm like, yeah, and like, what are the odds? What are the odds that you ever see him? Like, let's not forget too, like, the contract had to be terminated. It was a 2-year contract that they were stepping over the Flyers' 1-year told contract.
Right.
It's a 2-year contract. So you're sitting there going, not only are we talking this year when he's 27, we're talking next year when he's 28. How long are you supposed to play this game before you just give up?
And for any fans that may be nervous, by the way, his contract was, as you mentioned, they're told, which means it carried over. Yes, it has been, used. It is being burned up this season. Danny Briere has mentioned that he doesn't expect it to be a problem and that they expect him to sign.
There's a
deal here.
There is a lot of talk about a 2-year extension.
Okay.
2 years seems to be the number that keeps coming up.
Makes a lot of sense.
And to be honest, why would you even go through the trouble if you didn't have intentions of keeping him beyond the season? You're talking about, he just debuted with 7 games to go in your regular season, and there's no guarantee right now that you make the playoffs. So as a result of that, why would you go through the trouble if you weren't keeping him? And oh, by the way, this is a really interesting part of this conversation too, because now that Kolosov is here as well, the goalie picture is insane. As long as you get
moving forward, it is very interesting.
Interesting, but clear, because as long as you get an extension done with Fedotov,
he's probably your guy.
Well, no, it's pretty evident to me that you're going to move forward next year, because Sam Harrison's under contract next year too. So next year, your 2 NHL goalies are Sam Harrison and Ivan Fedotov. And your number one in the minors is Alexei Kolosov, while you have 2 more just developing in juniors or in Russia, one way or the other.
And that sounds absolutely spectacular for all those guys. Let the young guys cook in the minors, let the older guys
what's a bigger
bigger
deal to me is the fact that pretty much from the moment that Carter Hart took the leave of absence and that's going to probably clear itself up as soon as, as the season winds down, as the league year ends, I'll call it, because once that contract is no longer, like, they just have to non-qualify him if they, to do all the,
which I assume will be happening at the first moment available.
Sure.
Yep.
But we were sitting here, like, maybe we weren't, because I don't think we did a show in this time frame, but I remember going on the air on 97.3 and having conversations about, well, in the off season, they're going to have to find somebody. You're going to have to go through this. I think even just in passing, we had brought up names like Alex Nedeljkovic or Scott Wedgwood, or
we talked about
a guy like that, guys like that, who you're like, you just
Alex
need somebody.
Lyon, or
well, I
didn't
go there because I didn't think they were going to go back to somebody else. But you're right though, in the same vein, because you needed somebody who you felt like you could put in a little bit more frequently than you were seeing. Like, hey, listen, we can't give Cal Peterson starts. We can't give Felix Sandstrom starts. And I do think that this also clears the slate. Like, because let's not forget. So if Kolosov is your number 1 in the minors, Cal Peterson's got 1 year left on the contract that you can bury in the minors again. So he's probably your backup there.
No big deal.
And I'm pretty certain that this means it's going to be the end of the road for Felix Sandstrom, because his contract is up. He would have needed a new one too.
You can carry. Yeah, it probably is.
It's not that they wouldn't want to, because I see where you're going with it.
He probably wants an opportunity.
I want you to tell me how he's signing to be the number 3 in the minors.
I agree. No, I thought that through, and that made a lot of sense. And
right. Like, it just doesn't make, like, now that this is the way it is. Honestly, I wasn't sure a week ago. Right. A week ago, it might have been, hey, listen, they might have, they might be keeping him, because who knows who's playing? Well, and who knows who's playing where? Like, you still got to go out and do the work.
It's the kind of situation where you're looking at it and going, no, that's a vulnerable job.
Sure.
And now it's a lot less vulnerable.
Sure. And to be honest, think about what that does for, I don't want to say for your cap space, but let's be real about for your cap space. Fedotov's not going to make a ton of money. He's going to have nothing to go off.
Small sample size, right?
So your 2 goalies are probably making a combined $2.5 million, because I think Harrison's is 1.5. Let's give Fedotov a
will probably get a little more than that. You don't think he gets 1.5 to 2?
Nah, not with no NHL experience.
Yeah, but he's got enough other experience that I think it might drive the price a little bit. Again, I don't think he's making a ton of money. He's not sitting here making 4x4, but I could see him getting it up to 1.5 or 2. But regardless, you're still paying your goalies 4.
Then at most, even I'll go 1.5, and I'll say they're making a combined 3.
Okay, fair enough. So
I would love to see that number at 2.5, but combined 3, but see what I'm getting at is that another backup who is out there may have cost more because there's more of an NHL track record.
Absolutely. 100%.
You're now opening the door
even like Scott Wedgwood makes way makes more than Ivan Fedotov.
Wedgwood could have made 1.75 to 2, probably.
Absolutely.
No, honestly. And what I'm getting at
Scott Wedgwood, not very good.
So what I'm getting at is that it opens the door for at least something different. I don't know what the something different is going to be. If whether or not they make the playoffs or not, they're close enough at this point that you're not going to tell me that Danny Briere is not going to just sit on his hands and go, it's just part of the process.
Well, and here's the thing that we have to look at. Danny Briere, we came on this show and we criticized Danny Briere for, well, at least I did. You weren't as hard on it. softly criticized Danny Briere for not going and getting a little bit of goaltending help at the deadline. There were enough backup names floating out there that you could have potentially gotten somebody.
Unless Danny Briere knew something that we didn't.
Unless you're making your free or your trade deadline addition with about 8 games to go. And I expect, so we'll get into how Fedotov, ended up coming into the game on Monday night against the Islanders, but I expect that he will make his debut in either Buffalo. Well, right, in either Buffalo or Columbus this weekend.
I'm leaning towards Buffalo.
Just get it out of the way.
Because I think that every day that Sam Ersson gets is insanely beneficial to him for how much work he's had to have so far.
And frankly, I'd be okay with Saturday night in Columbus being Sam Ersson's last game until
Thursday.
The Capitals.
Well, I don't think. I know that
listen, if you beat Buffalo, Columbus, and Montreal, if you win all 3 of those games,
fair.
I think you give Fedotov the Rangers.
We'll see. I mean, it'll be interesting.
We'll be back on Sunday to talk about that before it happens.
I was already of the mindset that I wanted to see what I don't say what the situation looked like, but I wanted to see exactly that. If let's also say you took care of business against against Montreal and Chicago in the first place, and you're getting points.
Wow. You just had an extra 4 points right now.
Well, I know, but where I'm going with that is that if that would have been the case, and you can open up room, I was going off of the fact that yes, okay, whomever it is, and as it shaped out that Fedotov's here, okay, as it starts to play out that way, he's getting one of the 2 over the weekend, and then kind of just all depends. And I did it the other way. My way was, I'm definitely keeping an eye on that Tuesday game in Montreal for him. I think Ersson's getting the Rangers no matter what. Because of the fact that there's a way it could be your playoff matchup.
I don't necessarily disagree, but I'd like to see a world where he doesn't have to. Yeah, but I agree that he's probably getting that start.
And then after that, if you would have taken care of business against Montreal and Chicago, and after that we're talking about 2 games left, and maybe there's a chance that they were in if they had done that, right? Yeah. That if the margin was big enough that you don't need the points that desperately in that situation, I would have considered at that point, maybe Ersson still gets the Jersey game because you're at that point, you're looking at probably about a week before he plays again.
Okay.
But because the playoffs are starting on the 20th, I believe, of April. So it's a little bit of a gap. So it would have been a week. So I would have pumped the brakes and been like, okay, he gets one more. So he has a week off. And then that last game against Washington was I don't care who it was. At that point in time, I would have given the start to Felix Sandstrom because it doesn't carry that level of meaning.
Right.
So, different story now. I just find it hard to believe that, and I want to pump the brakes because it was 2 periods and overtime, and he hasn't started a game yet. And I want to keep seeing him because I can't just make judgments like that off of 40 minutes of play. But I can't help but think that this is not going to be just one start. I don't know how it's going to be.
No way.
I don't know how it's going to be more than one yet, whether it's going to be he's just we're going to rotate for right now, or is it going to be at the tail end and Ersson's still going to be your guy? I don't know how that's going to happen yet. But
if you're going to give
I think he's getting at least 2 starts.
If you're going to give Ersson the Rangers, which I don't necessarily disagree with you, then I think Fedotov plays against the Sabres, the Canadiens,
and then after that, no, I'm not even going that far because after that, I want to pull back and see what the standings are.
I agree. I think it depends on the race. If it looks like that Washington game is really going to matter, then I think you play Fedotov against the Devils as well.
And the only other counterpoint I have to this whole conversation is really the unpredictable factor, which is at the end of the day, and this is the interesting part of this conversation too, though, because the starting goalie is probably less John Tortorella, more Kim Dillabaugh, because Torts goes to Kim Dillabaugh and kind of is getting a feel for who should be in more or less. But John Tortorella made the call on Monday and took a guy who quite literally had 1 informal practice on Friday and 2 morning skates on Saturday and Monday, barely hasn't even really broken in his equipment yet.
Right.
And said, in the biggest game of the season, you're in.
Well, and you can say a lot of things about John Tortorella, and we're going to get into John Tortorella here in a minute.
I love when we get into torts like this.
Yeah.
Never a dull moment.
When he's not afraid to make a big move, and he has a decent track record of those big moves being really effective. How did that team come out in the second period? Like they were shot out of a cannon. Travis Sanheim
for the first shift.
Right. Travis Sanheim took the puck end to end immediately.
Yeah, beautiful rush and scores a goal and a game's tied. Yes.
Right. And now, again, is it the correct decision to throw in your Russian import, 4 days after he comes over, 5 days after his KHL contract gets, I don't know. Know. And Tortorella even said after the game, he put him in a hell of a spot.
So, and this is the interesting part because obviously it happens at the start of a period. So there's a buzz up in the press box as they're about to take the ice because they put the camera in the tunnel on.
Right, and you see him coming out.
Well, no, I didn't see anything. I hear somebody say he's coming in. And because of the way the first period had relatively ended, I thought they meant, the captain's waiting there to come back out. He's coming back.
Coots is back. Great.
Right. Because that just seemed like the normal, look at this. He's actually back. That didn't look good, but he's back. And then you look up and you realize, no, that's number 82 coming in. That's the new guy who just showed up 3 days ago coming in.
By the way, we didn't mention it when we did his little intro here, but Ivan Fedotov typically wears the number 28. And I don't know if he made this decision or if somebody in the organization gently reminded him. He was not going to be wearing that number.
I think that he was probably informed of it, but also at the same time respected it.
Super duper respectful, of course. I am not implying anything otherwise. And by the way, since I didn't mention it, we alluded to it a couple of times. He's 6'8".
6'7". I hate to burst your bubble. That's the official measurement from the team.
I will live in denial until Elite Prospects changes it.
Regardless, having stood next to him in the scrum last night, he is very tall.
Yeah, okay, you've stood next to him and you've stood next to me. What's the...
Well, so no, here's my comparison because the pictures that came out obviously on the day
that Danny Briere pictures.
Well, because I'm roughly Danny Briere's height. We talked
as a tall person, that was so friggin' funny.
We talked to Danny Briere, and I'm looking Danny Briere square in the eyes. Okay. No problem whatsoever. We're the same height, basically. And the first, I'm going to bring up 2 names. One of them we already brought up, to be honest, because I do remember, I remember the first time I got in front of, and this was actually while he was still in the minors, but I remember the first time I got in front of Anthony Stolars, who is 6'6". And
he's a big boy. Yeah.
Big, tall dude. And yeah, he towers right over you. No question about it. So I think of him right away, but I thought back and honestly, because it was kind of like, because Fedotov's going to be the new shiny toy kind of thing right now. Obviously, like he just got here and everybody was, it's interesting though. Cause I think everybody's excited to potentially see him. Obviously, like he's here, but I think there's also an element where it's knowing his story. That's also adding to it. Like he's still here after all of that.
People are a little excited to see him, almost in like a freak show kind of way.
Well, no, I think I'm saying
a little bit,
but I'm saying I also think it has to do with people realizing what the story was, and that like
that's what
this
I'm
was
saying.
almost not possible. And it's like,
you're the Arctic Circle guy,
right? It's like you're here, and now you're one of us. We'll take care of you. Don't worry.
This is the guy who got arrested at his gym because allegedly he was dodging his his military service to come to Philadelphia and play for the Philadelphia Flyers, and was allegedly arrested as a direct retaliation to that. And like this is that guy, like that story, that crazy story you heard 3 years ago. Like this is him. This is that guy.
Sure.
He's going to be your goalie for some of these games and maybe into the playoffs.
So I'm going to do something that I know you love, because when we get to throw out a random name on the show, we always like that type of stuff. This is how we fall down the rabbit hole of stuff, right? There was a name that I thought of as we were reading up more on Fedotov and things like that, and it's not like it's a Russian goalie story as much.
Okay.
It's the fact that goalies who are that height range, I'll call it 6'6" or whatever, that used to be a thing where I think it was because the pictures that came out from that Friday informal skate where he's standing pretty much upright and the crossbar is at his waistline.
Yeah, he can rest his elbows easily on top of the crossbar.
Right. And so the reason I'm bringing that up is because like he looks so big in the net that it's like this guy is massive, takes up all this space. How do you score on a goalie who takes up all this space? Right.
It's a walrus. Ridiculous.
I've seen that a lot too. But the first name, because now it's much more commonplace to find a goalie that is that size now.
Sure. Ben Bishop was really the guy that kind of ushered in that.
Oh,
change.
I'm going
back into the vogue.
I'm going back further because here's the name that I think of, and I got to pull up his numbers because this is the. I would have
Flyers goalie?
No, it's not a Flyers.
Okay. I was about to be very, very nervous because holy, there were some names.
No, because this is a guy who honestly, here's the tie. He was so good against the Flyers. I thought he played more than he did, and he didn't. This is a guy who in his NHL career had 46 games played, 27 starts, had a 16-14-5 record, a 274 goals against average, a 905 save percentage. And that doesn't sound like anything special until I go look at his career splits and find out that when he played the Flyers, he played 8 games against the Flyers, had a 5-1-1 record, a 939 save percentage, and a 1.65 goals against. Who is it?
Wait. Okay.
Because I feel like you know it.
I'm gonna do 5 questions or less. Like I'm not gonna, not gonna go crazy on this.
Go ahead.
Eastern Conference or Western Conference?
Eastern.
Okay.
Eight of his what? How many games did I say? 46 career games. 8 of them were against the Flyers. So East.
Before or after the 6 division, 4 division shakeup?
Before.
Okay, so we're talking like lockout era ish.
Pre-lockout.
Okay, pre-lockout. Ooh.
Okay,
I don't know. Give it to me. No, I don't.
It's semi. Okay, actually, it's right in that range. So part of it was pre-lockout, part was post-lockout. So sorry.
Just give it to me. Yeah.
Does the name Steve Valiquette ring a bell?
Ooh. Okay.
Steve Valiquette was 6'6", 210,
big boy,
and looked massive in goal.
Enormous. Yep.
And played the Flyers with such regularity that. I believe, and I'd have to go back to look this part up. I think, do I still have the splits open? I don't know if I do. Oh, wait, no, it's right here. Okay, so not only did he have that record against the Flyers, so 8 games played, 5-1-1 record against the Flyers, 939 save percentage, 1.65 goals against. He also had 2 shutouts against them. The guy only had, 4 shutouts in his career. 2 of them were against. So, like, you get where I'm going with this? Is that
was a good Flyers team, too.
But you get where I'm going with this, where it's like, this was this guy who, it was like, they started him every time, and it was, well, how do you score on the 6'6" guy who takes up half the net? Because he's massive. And I could have swore he played longer than 46 career games. Like, it felt like because it was...
Because he just tormented you specifically.
Well, no, well, not only that, but it was, you know what it was also? Because obviously the connection here is he played for the Rangers for a lot of years.
Right.
He was back and forth between the minors and the NHL for a lot of his career.
Okay.
It always seemed like when the Rangers played the Flyers in some of those years, he was up for a reason. So it became more and more interesting. Like it was like he was always around. This, you know what he was too? He was pre-Lundqvist.
Well, you know who else was pre-Lundqvist? Did he catch the tail end of Richter? It would make sense why you're not playing many games if you're backing up Mike friggin'
maybe
Richter.
At the beginning because he did have a couple seasons pre-lockout.
Okay.
Let me see when he first started playing for the Rangers, to be honest, because his first season he played 6 games I don't know if it's because I didn't track this number. I guess
we also don't necessarily need to go down a Steve Ballard.
No, we're not going down far. I'm not going down far. He didn't. Okay, so he got to the Rangers mid-season in 03-04 and played in only 2 games. So I think that's about as far as Richter would have ever gotten. Like Richter did not play post-lockout.
No, you're right.
So
but regardless, so we have Ivan Fedotov in the NHL now. He's 27 years old. He joins the Philadelphia Flyers coming off, all things considered, a fairly successful KHL career. I mean, like you said, he was the goalie for whatever the Russian national team is.
Well, and people like to look at numbers that like when guys come from the KHL, they like to look at numbers of other Russian goalies that have come from the KHL, had a little bit more of a substantial career there, and then like made something of themselves in the NHL level. His save percentage over his KHL career is .921, and it was only Sergei Bobrovsky in his KHL career had a .925.
Right.
And it's like, okay, clearly Bobrovsky's a guy who turned himself into something.
Sure. And this year in the KHL, Fedotov had played 44 games, had a 237 goals against and a 914 save. But you have to remember that he didn't play hockey for a year because he was
having a year off like when you're
in the Arctic Circle. So like everything we've said about Sean Couturier, Sean Couturier was in a hockey facility doing rehab, theoretically, watching game film and, doing other hockey related things. Ivan Fedotov was on a submarine in the Arctic Circle. And oh, by the way, he's 6'8" on a submarine, 6'6", 6'7", 6'8", whatever. You're too tall to be on a submarine. Trust me, I know.
Well, and in fairness too, like it's really interesting to have that year be you're 25, 26 years old. And you've played your entire life to that point. And now someone's telling you, nope, you're not playing for a year. And everything is on hold for you from that aspect.
And then, also your country's at war and there's a chance you may die. But also we're in the Arctic Circle, so there's a chance you may die.
By the way,
you're 6'6.5" on a submarine, so there's a chance you may die.
By the way, I love it because I just looked down. I've got, like I said, I got the iPad set up kind of to whatever that commercial, the Walrus commercial just came on as we're talking about this. It's really funny.
Nailed it.
As we move forward, because so by the way, he comes in. Let's do the part where he comes in, and then before we shift gears to the John Tortorella portion of this conversation, I feel like it might be an appropriate time to do scoreboard updates really quick.
Okay,
but right now I want to do Fedotov coming in first, and then we'll close the door on Fedotov, and then as we shift to Tortorella, we'll do the scoreboard.
So you get through the first period of that Islanders game, and Ersson lets up 2.
The first one,
first one wasn't bad.
No, it's not that it wasn't bad. I think the first one hit Zamula on the way in and fluttered. So you've got it hit somebody else kind of. It still didn't look great. And then the second one he really needed.
Yeah, second one was a really tough one. And I think looking at it, like I said, it's one of those aggressive John Tortorella moves that when it works out and Travis Sanheim takes the puck end to end and scores right away, you look great for doing it.
Bingo. And it's exactly that. There was really only 2 possibilities. It's either going to work and you're going to look like a genius, or it's not going to work at all and this is going to be a disaster. And to be honest, and they tried their hardest to make it a disaster, because I said it at some point in time not long after he came in, and I turned around and said it in the press box, you watch, his first save attempt is going to be a breakaway. Just watch. It's going to be a breakaway. And then of all people, it's Matt Barzal, who's their most skilled player.
Yep.
And
Fedotov steps up.
And I'm going to tell you right now, this is not even to say the inexperience. It's I'm calling it inexperience because I'm saying inexperience in the sense that he hadn't played much yet.
The unfamiliarity.
No, I'm calling it not playing much in terms of if he's played more or if he got more time to get loose and get the gear, broken in and all that stuff like that. He probably just snags that with the glove.
Absolutely.
Instead, it hits off the glove. It drops in front of him. He's got to cover it up on, before the rebound gets away. Look, it's fine. And what I will say about him that was a positive, there were a couple times where, listen, he looks a little shaky at first. He's definitely feeling it out as he's in, and he settled in.
Yep. Very aggressive playing the puck.
Aggressive playing the puck. His ability to get square was good. He definitely squared up a lot of the chances. He clearly I remember with Stolars, when I watched Stolars for the first time, it's real when you have a goalie that's got that kind of length, it's really hard to or not say really hard. Well, it's really hard for the opposition to kind of score on the lower part of the net because you can take up so much of it with just your legs.
You go in the butterfly and the entire bottom of the cage is blocked off.
So watching him being able to at least relatively move cross crease a little bit, like he faced a redirection like pretty early on. It was another it was a tip in attempt, and he got it, and it's like, okay, that's a good challenge and things like that. So it's that's the stuff that you want to see more and more of that. And as he got settled in, it looked really good. The goalie allows at the end of the second period. I don't know who was stopping that. It's a redirect right in front of him.
Yeah, there's
the more that I watched it, if it doesn't hit Anders Lee's stick, he's in position for it.
Absolutely.
So it's gonna, dude takes up a lot of the net. It's gonna hit off of him somewhere.
He looked really good, and then
and Anders Lee makes a great play. And the bigger issue there is the turn. Like the Islanders did not score a goal in this game that wasn't off of a turnover.
Tough.
Every single goal was off of a turnover in some way, shape, or form. And that was probably the bigger issue is that you were just continuing to play in your own zone too much. The fact that the guy came in cold off of the bench 3 days after, 3 practices of, 1 informal practice and 2 morning skates is all he's got.
Yep.
And he shows up and faces 17 shots in the second period and makes 16 saves. Full marks.
And looks like you said, it took him a couple of minutes to kind of settle in, but he looks pretty comfortable by the end of that period. Like he's chasing down pucks. When his skating, he looks very comfortable getting out of that.
I think that's become an acquired trait of Russian goalies because literally Shesterkin knows how to play it. And Shesterkin looks like at some point in time down the road, he's already attempted it a couple times. He looks like somewhere down the road, he's going to come either, if he doesn't do it, he's going to come close to scoring a goal.
Say it. What's
that Fedotov's going to do it?
Come on. You saw that clear. You saw that clear on the penalty kill.
Sure.
He was half trying and there was a goalie in the net. Come on now.
He for a guy who was making his NHL debut, he did it with the confidence of a Ron Hextall for sure.
Like, he looks like
I'm going to take this thing and this is my job right now. I'm getting it out.
He looks like a guy who spends 20 minutes at the end of practice just dumping a bucket of pucks down the net towards the other cage.
He had barely been on the ice for warmups, and he steps on the ice and he immediately shoots one into the net usually.
Yep.
Yeah, like
he looks super duper comfortable.
And granted, like I get it, he's only shooting that from it, like toward, from like the hash marks here. Like it's not like it's crazy, but the thing about and this is the thing about Shesterkin is that when they're because this is a penalty kill situation you're talking about. So when the Rangers are killing a penalty, Shesterkin's a third defenseman almost.
Oh, absolutely, he's out
there.
You
turn into a third defenseman on your penalty kill, it just adds to it.
Well, and especially, listen, I know we're thinking a little bit ahead here. Thinking about how deadly the Flyers penalty kill already is, if you throw in a goalie who can give you a stretch pass,
sure.
Woo-wee. So that's why I layered that in on just exciting.
Well, I knew where you were gonna go with it, with how aggressive their penalty kill is, and that if you can get a guy who's up ice, if he can get it to him, it's gonna open the door.
I grew up watching Martin Brodeur just absolutely demolish teams. What do you like? Hello.
Yeah. I hear you. And then the stark contrast is that 17 shots faced in the second period, and then next to nothing for the final 21 and change.
Turns out the Islanders are a second period team, like in space.
Well, no, it turns out that the Flyers realized in the third period, we better get some scoring chances or we're going to lose this game.
Well, and let's talk about that second period, because somebody who did talk about that second period.
So I know where you want to shift gears. So before we do that, before this gets outdated, let's do the scoreboard update really quick.
Yeah, I had it real quick. Yeah.
So I am currently
even though it'll be outdated by the time the show goes live.
Well, no, we might depending on how this goes, we might have some updates by the end of the show if we keep going any further here.
Yeah.
It's the end of the second period in Buffalo, and the Sabres have a 3-2 lead on the Capitals. By the way, the Sabres out shooting the Capitals 25-11 through 2 periods.
Man.
It was 3-1 actually. It took a late final minute power play goal in the second period for the Capitals to be back in this game, but So
They're back in
far,
this game. Going into the third period, you're only down a goal.
They're in the game, but Buffalo is trying to help you. Let's just put it that way. They are making an attempt. I will put it that way. Really the only positive result you're going to get out of this next game I'm going to mention is if there's no overtime involved, which appears to be the case at the moment. The Devils leading the Penguins 3-1 into they're just into the third period now, so that's fine. You know, somebody's going to have to get 2 points out of it. It doesn't really matter who. They're both further out of it. That could easily change tomorrow. You know, I think the Devils play the Rangers tomorrow.
Okay.
So, you know, especially if you're spending a lot on beating the Pittsburgh Penguins, then, you know, playing the Rangers may not be the best thing. And then another interesting game for you. The Islanders are playing the Chicago Blackhawks. That game is down to 5:37 remaining in the second period, and it is 1-0 Chicago.
Ooh, we love that.
So, and remember what I said about the Islanders too, by the way, a little earlier, a loss of any kind. So just getting the game tied up doesn't mean anything just yet. They lose in any way, they will not be able to pass the Flyers before Friday or tie the Flyers before Friday.
We love that. We love that for our sanity here.
Right. So anywho, those are the 3 games to watch. Let's talk about Torts.
Yeah, let's talk about Torts because, man, he has had some good ones since our last show. It has been a tough couple of weeks in Flyerland. We've talked about 5 straight losses, and if you have watched the NHL at all in the last 25 years, you know that when a John Tortorella team loses a couple in a row, you're probably gearing up for something fun.
So can I kind of just lead us to this moment for a second?
Absolutely.
Because let's not forget that was it going to be 4 weeks ago tomorrow on Wednesday.
Okay.
Wednesday, April 3rd. 4 weeks back. That's the day that the Flyers traded Sean Walker.
Okay.
And then extended Nick Seeler. So tons of activity right then and there. You're down Seeler, you traded Walker, you put 2 rookies into your lineup, you go out and you get your best win of the season against Florida. 2 days later, it's post-trade deadline. You go out, you lose 7-0 to the Tampa Bay Lightning. And oh, by the way, your coach gets ejected and then suspended.
Right.
Never a dull moment, right? And then it continues to proceed because you end up in, over the course of the next handful of games, just a handful of absolutely wild ones, like 6-5 to Boston and 6-5 to the Rangers that just go back and forth and there's no end. And primarily in the third period of both games, you know, these are just 2 competitive games, like 2-2 through 2 periods. Nothing wrong with that. That feels like playoff style. And then all of a sudden it gets wide open in the third period.
Third period becomes a circus.
Yeah. Right. So you have all of those types of things happening and all that type of stuff. Oh, by the way, so what happens in the middle of all of this stuff, by the way, over the course of that gauntlet? You bench the captain, scratch him for 2 games it was. You know, that's a thing. That's a thing that happened. Never a dull moment. It's always something in Flyerland, right?
Yep.
So which brings us to really Monday, but I'm going to take it a different direction as we get into it, but I'll let you kind of lead into it first.
Okay.
What happened on Monday?
So I will let you get further into it because you were in the room and you let us know. You let us know it was a good one. The Flyers YouTube page, by the way, does a really good job of getting these pressers out very, very quickly. Like they turn it around immediately.
Well, I will give them credit for turning it around quickly, considering that sometimes there's editing involved
and sometimes there's editing missed.
It depends on what it is, but
and so the big fat quote coming out of the start of Torts' media availability is that the team was soft.
Right. Well, and I'm okay. So let me just stop you right there.
Okay. Yeah. Go for it. Yeah.
So here's the first part of this that I want to say, because I feel like this press conference and Saturdays kind of go hand in hand to an extent, because it feels like a call and response.
Okay.
On Saturday, when they lost to Chicago the way they did, he brought up the fact that, you know, the team just sucked in general. It was just one of those games where everybody kind of sucked. And he brought up, I hope this is where it bottoms out for us. So it seemed like he was willing to throw that one out, move by it, as he likes to say. And as long as the next effort was where it should be, we're not going to have a problem.
Right.
Like, this happened. It is what it is. This time of year, you're going to get games like this.
Every team throws up duds.
Right.
We just got to forget it.
It was a dud, and we just didn't have it, and we couldn't execute. And, hopefully this is us scraping the bottom of it here. So I think that this was a response to, it clearly wasn't the bottom of it if he didn't like that second period, which obviously he didn't.
Fair enough.
The press conference in total lasted, the video clip on the Flyers YouTube page is 1:57, I believe. And you can argue with whether or not, 156, 157, or, whatever it may be. I just called it was just under 2 minutes.
Yep.
It doesn't sound like a lot when I say that. The start of the first answer made me first think we were getting 30 seconds to begin with. And then, to be honest, for 2 minutes, or just a shade under 2 minutes, there's a ton to unpack in under 2 minutes.
I have some of it pulled up here.
Oh, I normally don't do this a lot because I'm in agreement with what a lot of people say about stuff like this. Sometimes post-game quotes are not always the most fruitful thing. You're just not going to, sometimes you're just not going to get a lot out of it. It's a lot of just game to game.
It's a lot of pucks in deep, played a full 60.
Well, and I'm going to tell you right now, especially with John Tortorella, because there are nights where you're going to sit there and think he's going to be happy with with the result, but he wasn't happy with the process. So he's not giving us much. Before I even read any of the quotes, what I'm going to sit there and tell you right off the bat is that he's had moments where he's frustrated, angry, does this type of stuff in front of the media, and it feels like it's not necessarily more or less directed at the team. It's more directed at the media from a standpoint of, whatever you're going to ask me, you're not right about this. Like, your interpretation of the game it's either your interpretation of the game is wrong and I didn't see it the way you did, so don't ask it to me like that, or it comes down to one, like the game against Florida. He gets asked about Felix Sandstrom. He doesn't even give an answer. He just shrugs his shoulders, right? And the way that I take something like that is that's his way of saying, without saying a word, not even anything about Felix Sandstrom. It's his way of saying, you watched the game, didn't you?
Right. You know what happened.
Right. I'm not dismissing the question that was asked. And Torts later said he apologized to Sandstrom, and he apologized, right. and he said that Jordan Hall was the one who asked the question. He said you were totally valid to ask it.
Right.
It is totally valid to ask it. The point was that Tortorella can kind of give you this. You watched it. Why are you asking me? You saw it with your own two eyes.
By the way, speaking of the Florida Panthers, you mentioned them real quick. Did you see the Paul Maurice quote from the other day? Where he told the beat writers, yeah, whatever you think I would say, just write that. I won't.
Yeah, I did, because it was right after they clinched the playoff spot, and he was not thrilled at all because they didn't play well in that game.
Yeah, classic coach response.
Right.
So good.
So that's usually the two methods that you get. It's either I'm doing this for the media because your interpretation of the game in what you're asking is not the way I see it at all, and I'm going to make sure you know that.
Right. Or
it's, you saw it, so why do you have to ask? Kind of. This is probably the first time I can really remember him legit. I remember him having short press conferences last season that were especially at the beginning of the year. He had remember the first one that he kind of had that was like this, where it was guys, glass half full. Played a good game just because we lost. He's again, he's trying to control the narrative in that spot. He's trying to tell you, you're trying to come in here well, all these things went wrong. And his answer is, no, there were things that went right. We just didn't win the game.
Sure.
So don't make it out to be worse than it is. We just didn't win the game.
Right. Exactly.
This was one of the first times I can remember him literally coming in and just teeing off on the team itself. And it was, there's not a question you can ask me that I'm not going to it started that way. It started with here's your one word answer, soft. And you're going, oh boy, here we go.
Oh boy.
And, as he continued to elaborate, you got more and more and more material that just made this, everything. I start the whole thing. Also, his first answer, like you said, it was soft. And then he talked about how one guy played, the goalie. That
The
was
goalie,
the
yeah.
first answer.
I
And
will give him a little bit of credit. He's been criticized recently for how he's talked about his goalies, and he made it a point to come out and talk about how well Fedotov came in. He said he put him in a bad spot. He mentioned that he looked good. So I do want to give John
right.
Tortorella a little bit of credit here. He has received some criticism recently
that's
for his
just
goaltending, and he has learned some,
well,
some
and that's
lessons.
just I think that's just the thing though too is there's an element where as we're watching things like they're going to put him into this game, they're putting him in cold in the second period of this game. That's how he's making his debut. I think Tortorella, like in saying what he did, like in bringing that up, is like, yeah, I know, crazy, right?
Right.
Almost as if to say, go ahead and look at your calendar. I know what day it is on the calendar. No, it's not a joke. I really did that, and I think it was a little like I can't I put him in a tough spot too. So
Even
kudos,
I know that was a tough
right.
one.
So
Yeah.
kudos to that guy for playing well because truthfully, you're not talking about a point if he doesn't play well.
No, I agree. Absolutely.
So right then and there. I'm going to skip past the put him in a tough spot thing. We already covered that.
Yep.
This is where some of it starts. What I really should do, actually, I shouldn't read me putting stuff out there on social like I did, and should just go in and grab the transcription from the team because that'll have the questions, so I can go back and forth on it for a second. It'll take me one quick second here because it's very easy to find. So because this is the best way to do it. So again, so we already said the first one, soft. One guy played, the goalie. How encouraging is it that he came in cold and was able to do what he did or whatever? Terrific. He's the only guy that played. The next question, is it surprising, considering you said you trust the team, that you don't have to tell them or remind them like of how important the games are or whatever, or like what the situation is and all that stuff? And his answer, you're finding things out here, okay? When these games are at a whole different plane. It's still regular season, right? But it's a whole different plane. So we're finding things out. Okay.
Yep.
That there's not a whole lot to break from that one just yet. So let's go to the next answer where it really opens up.
I was gonna say, you can tell it's simmering though.
So the question, you talked after the last game about that it was that was what you felt wasn't a great performance. Are you concerned at all that tonight it kind of lingered again, that just like you said, it was a soft game? And he goes, not the whole game and not the whole group. Here's the money one right here. There are certain people that they don't have a clue how to play or just don't have it in them to play in these types of situations. This is why I'm glad we're playing them, because we have to figure things out as far as what we're going to become as a team here. That was embarrassing in the second period for the Philadelphia Flyer uniform, the way we played. Embarrassing. High marks as far as how we came back in the third. And there was a pause, and then he goes, some guys. Which now opens the door to interpretation.
Of course.
So which guys? Now, okay, deductive reasoning. Let's make it easy. The goalie showed up, and Sean Couturier didn't play. Sean Couturier didn't play for the last two periods. So guess what? It's not
probably
him.
Not those.
Although I'm going to tell you right now, people are going to look at that and say, we're trying to find, like, there's guys who don't have a clue how to play in these types of situations. There's guys on the team that have playoff experience.
Sure.
Multiple. So
Brian Hathaway has a Stanley Cup.
So on one hand, you're sitting there saying, well, surely it can't be, like, he's not talking about guys who have played in the playoffs. He's got to be talking about the young guys, right? I don't think that's the case.
I agree.
And I'm going to tell you why. I told you a few minutes ago, every goal the Islanders scored was off of a turnover. The first turnover, Scott Lawton tries to clear a puck over the middle of the ice. Next thing you know, it's in the back of the net.
Unforgivable. That's stupid.
He got an earful on the bench from Tortorella after the fact.
Yeah.
Now, before Couturier leaves the game, and granted, yes, is he going into the boards awkwardly, and does he get hurt off of it?
Hard to give him too much of a hard time.
But I believe he does try to play the puck back.
Yeah.
Before it happens. And it leads to a rush the other way, and he's now out of the play, regardless of injury or otherwise.
Right.
And that's so far, that's an alternate and your captain. The third goal is a soft clear by Travis Konechny that next thing you know ends up in the back of your net. And oh, by the way, following that, Travis Konechny took one more shift in the second period and then didn't play for the first 7.5 minutes of the third period.
Right. You've named your entire leadership group here. Right.
Joel Farabee had the lowest ice time of a forward that's name was not Cam Atkinson and Nick Delorier, I believe.
Okay.
So, do the math on that one too. Like,
Yep.
You're starting to pick up on it. Like, who he's not talking about in that spot? He's not talking about Owen Tippett, who hustled to prevent an empty net goal that allows you to tie the game and get a point. He's not talking about, say, Tyson Forrester, who has some energy in him. I don't think he's talking about Garnet Hathaway, who's still being physical and trying to get after it a little bit.
I'll be honest with you. They had their differences this season, but I don't even really think he's talking about Morgan Frost, even though he was responsible for one of those turnovers on Monday night.
I'm on the fence about that, and I'll tell you why. He has the big moment that ties the game. Yes, he's involved in the turnover that leads to the game winner. He wasn't great for the first 2 periods, so I think there's some involvement there.
Valid.
Like I'm going to tell you right now, if he's not playing Nick Delorier a ton, he's not talking about Delorier either.
That's true.
Like he's not talking about somebody like that. He's looking at the guys and guess who else he's probably not talking about, because this was probably his best game in a long time. He's not talking about Noah Cates. Noah Cates actually played one of his best games in a long time.
Right.
So
I do want to go back to this Tortorella quote specifically.
Are we at the next one, by the way?
Well, no, specifically this middle bit. I want to talk about the one you just talked about.
Okay.
Certain people who don't have a clue how to play or just don't have it in them to play in these situations. That's why I'm glad we're playing in them, because we have to figure things out as far as what we're going to become as a team. Now, there have been some rumors since our last show. I know Elliot Friedman talked about it. Some other folks talked about it. About John Tortorella potentially expressing a desire to finish his coaching career and transition towards a managerial career and kind of move into management in the front office and maybe step away from the bench. And we've talked for a while here on the show, basically since Chuck Fletcher left and all of the change that came with that. Well, that we had this whole new power structure, right? And the remaining members are Dan Helferty, Danny Briere, Keith Jones, and John Tortorella. And I just have to wonder, right? When he says it like that, we have to figure out who doesn't. When I just see people who don't have a clue how to play or just don't have it in them. Okay. To me,
are you thinking that's more like, that sounds more like a general manager than a coach? Is that what you're trying to get at?
Well, I don't necessarily know that, because I don't know exactly what role he's angling for, but it certainly seems to me as though John Tortorella is attempting to establish that he will be in the room, in the conversation during off-season changes.
I'm sure there's an element to that, but
I don't know how much I love that. Just because I tend to prefer to have a little bit more separation of church and state here, right? Like you got to have your hockey front office and your business front office, or like your hockey and your business hockey.
Well, I think you have to look at the fact that there's an element of that already existed to begin with, because I fully believe that's the reason Garnet Hathaway's here.
I don't disagree with that. That
straight up, I think Garnet Hathaway is a flyer because of the fact that
John Tortorella
wants a little sandpaper in there.
Okay.
Like you're not going to tell me otherwise. Now, Hathaway is not some completely incompetent player otherwise, where it's like, oh yeah, he just bangs guys around and that's all he does.
I think he's proven really useful this year.
He definitely has.
He's been a nice piece.
And so I don't think it's like that. And to be fair, to your point of what you're talking about, there's been things I believe, again, 32 Thoughts has had a lot on this, and I believe that I believe it was Friedman anyway, who talked about how Keith Jones has said, no, that's not the case. He's our head coach. We like him as our head coach.
Right.
And stuff like that. So maybe we're not going that far just yet. I'm going to tell you right now, the way that he answered all of this stuff was way more coach-like than anything else. Like,
that's fair.
To me, that's, as long as I'm on this bench, you don't do that. And we're finding out stuff about these guys, and this is why, it's almost as if to say, this is why I've got to stay here, because if I leave and go up to management, who's going to do this?
That's fair.
I've got to, this is why, this goes
Brad
back
Shaw
to,
and Rocky Thompson.
But this goes back to why they do, like, why do you think the first day of training camp is the bag skate, the endurance test, right? The rope, as Tortorella talks about.
Sure.
Because it's about pushing these guys to a level that they haven't gotten to before, and it starts on day one. Show up ready, because we're going to see who's in shape and who's not, or at least who's able to try to finish the thing and who battles to finish, right? So you got to factor some of that in to some extent. I know where you're going with this a little bit, but like at the same time, what's interesting too? There are lineup decisions that are made, and you think about how, like in this particular game, by the way, I guess knowing the importance of it, it's not Bobby Brink that's in or anything like that. It's no Cam Atkinson's going to play and Nick Delorier is going to play, and it's here come the veterans.
And man,
and I know how people feel about that, right?
I love Cam Atkinson, but he's been bad.
Here's my thing with this, and it's not directed at any particular player, because I can understand how there are people who maybe are just tuning in now. The Flyers are close to the playoffs. Maybe I better check this out. There may be people who haven't yet, who won't until they make the playoffs, if they do.
Sure.
So in that case, if that's the kind of fan you are of the team, you're not going to know as much about John Tortorella. But there are also people who I know watch more hockey and watch it all year round and watch it like we do.
Yeah.
That will say things about, well, like Tortorella's doing this or doing that, like the idea of putting the goalie in cold or whatever. And I can't help but sit there and think, like, the guy's been in the league as a head coach for 22 years. None of this is new.
Right.
This is how he is. He doesn't like the way something's going. He's going to go to this. He's going to try to mix it up, and he's going to talk like he does too. Like, there's no, like, if you haven't figured out by now that it's just who he is and this is how he does things,
you're not paying enough attention.
Then you don't know who he is. And that's what they've attached themselves to by making him the head coach, is that this is the way it's going to be. And it's also really hard. Like, listen, you can hate every decision he makes, and he's not playing young guys enough, and there's no reason why this guy shouldn't be playing or that guy shouldn't be playing, like Brink or Addard or Ginning or you name it. And if you feel that way and have all year, then understood. That's your stance on it. But if you're going to sit there and like the idea that people are going to complain about every move, like, are you complaining about every move he makes, or are you complaining about some of the stuff that he does? Because if you don't understand how he operates, I don't know how to help you.
Right. Like, I mean,
unless you are a complete casual who just happens to come in and be like, hey, wait a minute, why aren't the young guys playing? I'm tired of seeing 33, 34-year-old Cam Atkinson play, who's not really giving you a whole lot.
And I will say, even among national media who does watch hockey on a little bit more of a consistent basis, I don't think John Tortorella gets enough credit for being as consistent as he is.
Well, and this is also the point I wanted to make, is that I don't feel like you can sit there and say, well, he's in the Jack Adams conversation, but I think everything he does is crazy.
Right. That's just not how it works.
So you're going to admit he's pushing the right buttons, and he's done things to get this team to a level that nobody expected was possible, but he's crazy and he doesn't know what he's doing, and he's running the team. Like, you can argue that part. Is he running the team potentially too thin? Yeah, I can see that, because it's really hard to listen to the coach. No, it's really hard to listen to him sit there and talk about guys, as much as you're saying it maybe more as maybe less as an excuse, more as a reason that, like, guys are gassed and this is part of the result. You're the one who's been putting Travis Sanheim, Cam York out there for 25 minutes. You're the one who's been playing Sam Ersson. Sam Ersson, I think, has started 35 of the last 40 games.
Man, and like,
it's like, you could change it up at some point, but why doesn't it happen?
Well, okay, but
because you're competitive about it, you have a shot, so you're doing what you think is going to work to win.
Exactly, and specifically in the case of Carter Hart, obviously that is not something.
Well, that's the thing that threw the wrench into the whole thing,
right?
Anyway. Like it turned this goaltending race upside down, or goaltending situation upside down.
If Sam Ersson is not the primary starting only real option at goaltender, he probably plays.
Well, that's why I said nobody could
4 games down the stretch.
Well, and that's exactly
35 you just mentioned.
Well, and that's exactly why, like I said, if they had any ability to bring back a rotation because 2 guys were playing well, they never found it. Nobody stepped up. You had two other guys that you brought in who you tried to utilize before you figured out this situation.
Pretty easy for a guy who's 6'8" to step up.
Well, I hear you, but it's obvious. Like, you didn't know he was part of the equation though until there were realistically 8 games left in the season.
Yep. Oh, of course not. But as we sit here now, and I think this is a good time to kind of do a little glance ahead and kind of get out of here. I know we talked about it a little earlier in the show, but you got games against Buffalo and Columbus this weekend. But as we sit here, I do expect Fedotov to get some amount of playing time. I expect him to start one of these games against Buffalo or Columbus.
Yeah, we'll see which one.
Of course. And I think, Sam Ersson should not have played as many games as he has played this year.
Right.
He was not intended to be the starter. He was not on this roster to be the starter. There was never any real delusions that he was going to start more than 35 or 40 games this year. He was going to be a solid 1B at the most, probably a little more like a 2 if we're being honest, especially as we got down the postseason stretch and the Flyers are still in a playoff spot. And instead, he plays almost every game down the stretch. And when he doesn't, it's an absolute dumpster fire because Felix Sandstrom can't stop a beach ball and Cal Peterson's not much better.
Right. Not the interesting part, but it's like this also started in a situation where I'm sure he would not have played the number of games he did even at the very beginning of this, which was
exactly
hear me out.
Okay.
Carter Hart's last game as a Flyer was against Colorado on a Saturday afternoon.
Okay.
He got pulled from that game after 2 periods, and Ersson came in and finished it off. Okay. And Ersson still got the start the next day, which was probably the plan anyway. And they lost to Ottawa eventually. They were leading the game at one point, but then they lost in relatively late in the 3rd period. They lost 5-3.
Right. Okay.
By that, the next time they had a game, Felix Sandstrom was, I think it was, or maybe Peterson was the one who was up. Either way, it doesn't matter.
Somebody was up on an emergency
Somebody was up,
basis.
and Carter Hart was on leave. And at that point, Ersson got a game against Tampa, got a game against I don't even remember who the next one was, and then Boston closed it out. Okay. So it was in that sequence right before the All-Star break, and that it at least provided a break. But there's no way that Ersson was getting all 4 of those games that week.
Of course.
At the beginning of it.
Absolutely not.
But that is what started a string of, now he's just going to keep starting and starting and starting. And Cal Peterson started, I think it was their 3rd game back from the All-Star break, won it. Ersson got a bunch of starts after that. The next time Peterson played, it was bad. Yep. So next, okay. So when Felix Sandstrom gets up, Felix Sandstrom played the back end of a back-to-back and won it. Then the next 2 starts weren't as good, and that was where you drew the line again.
Hey, Kevin, can I ask you something?
Sure.
Early in this season, I made a comparison. Do you remember what that comparison was?
Probably not, because a lot's happened in that time.
Well, so it wasn't super early in this season. It was after they started putting a little bit of a run together. And it was right around Christmas time. I asked you, hey, Kevin, can we start comparing this team to 2010 yet?
Oh, no. I know what you're going to do.
And as we sit here now.
Is Ivan Fedotov in the role of Michael Layton right now? Is that what you're going to tell me? And Sam Ersson happens to wear number 33, which
looks a lot like Sergei Bobrovsky that year.
That wasn't Bobrovsky's year.
Oh no, you're right. That was Bush that year. Yeah.
I mean,
look, a little bit of goalie turmoil, a little bit of sneaking into the playoffs late.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'll ask Bush next time I see him if he sees it in Sam Ersson.
Listen, all I'm saying is if Bush mentions 2010 on the broadcast, I'm taking credit for it. Okay. But what I'm saying is we have seen in the NHL in the past, we have seen goalies come in that don't have a big sample size on them.
Sure.
Can't imagine there's been a lot of scouting in Russia over the last couple of years. You get a guy who comes in, he's been a high-end goalie. He's been in high-pressure situations. If he can come in, make some adjustments, look comfortable through this 6 games, I like what Sam Erson's done, but he has not done enough for me that he's your game 1 starter no matter what if you get in. I think Fedotov can
there's
steal
a lot.
that job.
Well, there's options, and maybe a better question answered through training camp next year more than down the stretch of a playoff run.
Oh, I'm way more excited for training camp.
Well,
already.
That's why I brought up what I did though too, is that there's going to be clarity now. It sure looks like as long as Fedotov is part of this picture, then you have your 2 NHL goaltenders and you have your number 1 in the minors too.
Yeah, it seems like you got your situation in a pretty good spot looking forward.
It still doesn't change my opinion, by the way, that they probably will still draft another goalie.
Probably. Why not?
I don't see why they wouldn't. So
goalies are such magic beans that you just have to have it.
Here's a good segue to looking ahead, because because obviously we keep focusing on the fact that next game is against the Buffalo Sabres. I don't know if you've seen it. The Buffalo Sabres came out in the 3rd period and scored 3 goals in the first 5:33. It's 6-2.
Oh, we love that.
So
we absolutely adore that.
There's basically 7 minutes left in the game, so it's looking like the Capitals are going to lose.
That is a huge game in hand.
How's this for a twist? Remember that 3-1 Jersey game? It is 5-3 Pittsburgh with 3 minutes left in the 3rd. That, by the way, might be the death blow to the New Jersey Devils at that point. And the
Islanders tied it up.
The Islanders tied it on a power play early in the 3rd. Still 1-1. Still,
if the Blackhawks can get that one in regulation, that would be enormous.
Yeah, but the thing that's crazier to me right now is the Buffalo-Washington game, and I'll tell you why. Because Washington really has it in front of them right now. And again, you're sitting here coming away from this asking yourself, does anybody want these playoff spots?
Well, as we sit here, we do not know the answer to that. The Flyers.
That is, by the way, assuming that nothing changes here in the final 6 minutes of that game, that is going to pull the Buffalo Sabres to within 5 points of that playoff spot.
Oh boy.
I mean,
maybe
they're
all
also
they're not out. All of a sudden that game on Friday night is big for them too.
Potentially. I mean, think about it. Imagine if they win. And does Buffalo have another game before then?
I'm not sure.
I'm scrolling through it really quick.
I'd imagine probably not.
I think Buffalo's also got a back-to-backs Friday, Saturday. So I don't see anything there. And correct. I do not see their logo up on Saturday though either. So I think it's just a Friday. Curious to see the goalie for that one, to be honest. I mean, so tonight it's been Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, who has been playing for Buffalo.
Yep.
They do still have Devin Levi on the bench as the backup, so could be either or.
They have their own interesting goaltending situation. And
what happens when you have 2 young guys? Yeah, it's kind of it's all of a sudden becoming reminiscent of the Flyers, right?
Right.
Or vice versa. The Flyers.
They got any secret Russians hanging out that we don't know about?
No, but I got to tell you. So one more quick point on that.
Yeah.
The secret thing.
Then we'll get out of here.
How many things, think about it. How many things have the Flyers kept under wraps this year until it happens? Somebody
needs to get Danny Briere the Mary Poppins purse for Christmas, because he just
keeps pulling things out from out of nowhere. I mean,
Matvey Michkov's been working out in Voorhees.
Right.
Hey,
or showed up at a visit.
Cutter Gauthier hated it here. He's gone.
Nobody didn't want to play here, and nobody knew about it.
Insanity.
Hey, by the way, Ivan Fedotov, who everybody thought was out of sight, out of mind, he's coming and he's here actually.
Right. My son pushed a wheelchair down the steps.
No, that one actually got out a little different. That was the thing he wasn't able to hide.
Well, that's why he's been so secretive since then. But
maybe.
All right. Like I mentioned off the top here, we will be back on Sunday. It'll be a quick little turnaround for us. So we will be back to talk about these games against Buffalo and Columbus. There will not be that many regular season games left at that point. We will well and truly be on the home stretch. So,
well, that's going to be that's the great part, right? Friday and Saturday, the 2 games we've just mentioned, they're going to matter. And
absolutely,
that's going to take you up to game 79 out of 82. Pretty good chance that 79 matters. And
Well, at this point in time, they're all going to matter, even if.
Well, what I mean is that there is obviously still a way. Like if let's face it, you keep losing and potentially have a stretch of losing out potentially.
Yeah.
Then you're going to be mathematically eliminated before game 82.
Oh yeah,
and then it's pretty
unlikely.
And that one doesn't matter. What I'm getting at is that that's the scenario that none of us saw coming. Was there's a chance that all 82 carry that meaning that you have a shot. And it may even come down to number 82.
Yeah, and it may very well, and much like 2010, it may come down to a divisional
game. Yeah, I know
game
you love that.
Hey, listen, worked out well that year. So, all right, we will be back on Sunday. We'll be a little bit closer towards that. In the meantime, like I said earlier, follow us on the social medias. We're at YWT Podcast. Kevin is at Kevin_Durso. Find us everywhere you find your podcasts, including sportstalkphilly.com. All right, signing off from Pittsburgh, signing off from Penguins country. It's weird.
Where it looks like they're going to get another win. So
I'll have some Flyers gear up here in the background within the next couple of shows here. I'm going to do my own little decorating here. We're going to be in this space for a while, so I'll have a chance to do some decorating.
I'll tell you what, I have a theory for when we're going to see it.
Okay.
We got 2 more shows before the regular season's over.
You're right. I should unveil the.
You think you're gonna have something up? Because I've been in your shoes.
I think I can make that work.
I did a couple of shows with nothing behind me either for a little while, so I get.
I might get some things kind of in.
You're good.
Yeah, we'll get this going here soon, but I will definitely. Yeah. I'll definitely. Us up in decent running condition.
All I was thinking about was the fact that it's like, we have the show one this Sunday, one the following Sunday, and it's like then the regular season finale.
The show after that could very well be the playoff show. We might have to do an emergency show in the middle there because the playoffs might start. So
yeah, that's fair. I didn't think about that.
We'll talk about that off the air. We got a little time. We got a couple of weeks. So, and like I said, until then, we will be back on Sunday with a brand new episode. Like, share, subscribe, follow, tell your friends, all of that nonsense.
Do all of that.
Do the YouTube stuff, do the algorithm stuff. Help us out here. So until then, Sunday. See ya.